Today we are reviewing the 2020 Specialized Fuse Comp. This has been a highly requested bike, and for good reason. Specialized is one of the biggest dealers in the US, and it's easiest to find this hardtail than almost any other hardtail in a shop. We're on beautiful Mescal, starting out with a good little climb. Right away, there are two things I notice. Seat angle feels slack. That's a bad thing. It means I'm sitting farther back than I want. And number two, the stack's a little bit low. And the way Specialized has these set up, there's no real way to adjust your stem. They have 3 of those 1/4 inch spacers, so I might be able to raise it a 1/4 inch. It feels a little bit XC-like to me in the climbing position because that front end's lower. I wouldn't mind a little more rise on the bars or taller steer tube. The steer tubes on these are tiny. If you ever try to sell your fork from one of these, chances are it won't fit any other frame because it's cut so short. I'm running the 2.6 tires at about 20 psi. This is an aluminum frame. I've adjusted the chain stays to be as short as possible because I like a playful rear end, and I like my reach longer than my chain stay. The 2.6 tires are a great choice on this bike, but the rims need to be wider in my opinion. Everybody's specking 2.6s on 30 mil rims and they just roll. And what I mean by that is when you come around a corner, the G-forces want the tire to roll instead of stay in line with the rim. A wider rim would help that not want to roll so much, make the tire more stable. I'd love to start seeing 35 mil internal rims on 2.6 bikes. But I still think a 2.6 is the right tire for this. You're able to take the edge off any harshness that an aluminum frame would feel. And this frame lies somewhere in between the harsh aluminum frames and the compliant ones. It's stiffer than the Chameleon and the Timberjack, but it's not as stiff as the Orbea or the Common Saw. Nice little frame. The RockShox Recon on this, for my weight, I weigh 175. They recommend 100 psi, 90 to 100, something like that. I tried that and man, I could bottom out in the parking lot. So I pumped it up to 120. I could still bottom out in the parking lot and it was just blowing through its travel way too fast. So I've actually got it up to 145 right now, which is 45 psi over recommendations. And now it feels good. It feels nice and supportive. But it's weird that I had to add so much more over stock. But it feels decent. There's not a lot of range in the fork for adjustments, rebound and compression and such. There's like 4 or 5 clicks of rebound. We're running SRAM SX Eagle drivetrain. I know a lot of people like to dog on this drivetrain. It shifts just fine. It feels awesome. I have 0 complaints with it. It's heavy, it's cheap, but man, it gets people on entry-level bikes having a great experience. They're able to get a wide range shifting that feels solid. Yeah, it's heavy. This bike's a little over 32 pounds. It doesn't ride like it. It doesn't feel light, but it doesn't feel like an anchor. So even though it's 32 pounds, it carries its weight well. Feels a little more like a 30-pound bike. And for the price, all hardtails are going to be pretty close to that. The head angle is 66.5. and it feels fine to me. Feels great as a trail bike. Comfy little bike on these 2.6s. Just a great all-rounder. Let's try a technical steppy climb here. Oh yeah, no problem. Went right up that. I have a lot of fun on this bike. This bike costs less than the wheel set on the bike that I normally ride. And I'm still grinning when I ride it. It's really fun. I really like the shape of the bars on this bike. In a lot of these entry-level bikes, you're getting goofy bars for some reason, but these feel great. Cockpit feels good, even though these SRAM level brakes are goofy looking and they look clunky. They feel great to me. I have no problems with them. 160 rotor in the back, 180 in the front, and I have plenty of braking. And these tires are fantastic. Specialized makes amazing tires, and they spec'd great tires on this. They seated really well with the tubeless sealant. They have great traction, and they have great suspension characteristics. They don't beat you up. The hub is lacking, and that's to be expected on a $1,700 bike. And this is $1,700 MSRP. Usually shops do not list bikes for full MSRP. So you have to be careful when you're comparing this to direct bikes like Common Sol or Canyon, etc. It's a great all-around trail bike though. Have fun riding it. Yeah, it's easy to put where I want it to be with that shorter chainstay. I initially ran it in the longer chainstay setting and I did not like it as much. It just felt a little dead, not super exciting, just kind of dated to me. Keep in mind I'm a short guy, and on a lot of bikes the reach is shorter than the chainstay, so anytime I can shorten the chainstay, relatively speaking, the reach gets proportionally longer compared to that. And I like a short chainstay because I can play around more. I can lift up the back wheel easier. I can whip it around corners better. But that's just personal preference, but it's really cool that you can change the chainstay on this bike. And their sliding dropout system's cool. It's pretty easy to use. All right, let's take this thing down some spice. Here we go. Those brakes feel fantastic. All right. Yeah, this is a fun little bike. With that short chainstay, it wants to get partying. Yeah. This trail's got some good flow and good bonus stuff to it. This bike wants to just keep going faster and faster, and it can take it. It's amazing how an entry-level bike like this can feel so good. I know you're thinking $1,700 entry-level bike. Yes, that's where we are today. But it feels good. There's not a single component that's like, oh, that's got to be changed ASAP. I'd love wider rims. That'd be at the top of my list. And then a better fork with a little more adjustability. But this fork's not exactly holding me back at the moment. still having a blast on this. Woo! Yeah, so fun. I love this trail. This bike is really fun. It feels more modern than the Timberjack. A bit more of a hard charger. It's weird. It just feels like it has more of an attack mode than the Timberjack. This bike is a completely different bike than the 2019 and older versions. The Gen 1 was cool and ahead of its time, but it was stiff. Felt kind of like a budget bike. This bike feels sorted. I wish the dropper post went a little lower. I don't need it, but I hate it when you're already on a smaller frame. I'm on a size medium, which is the right size for me. But the dropper can't go down all the way because it hits that water bottle bolt. And that's another centimeter of drop that I could get, and the short people need all the drop they can get in their droppers. Oh, that was hard. This little bike did it. I know there's a tendency to want to just upgrade when you buy a bike like this, but I recommend learning to tune what it's got and maximizing it. It's a budget fork. It's one of the lowest end 12-speed group sets made. Cheap brakes, but it feels great. I don't need to change anything. I'm having a blast out here. It's amazing how good components have gotten. And when you match good budget components with a solid frame with good geo, it's super fun. I would hands down take this over the common saw, even though you might get a better fork or group set with the common saw. You're gonna have a better ride experience on this. All right, a little more fun, playful stuff. This manuals really well with that short chainstay in the short position. If you know how to tune a bike and you get the time to learn how to make a fork feel good, how to get tire pressure just right, you can make these budget bikes dance, and they're really fun. Yeah. Woohoo! Oh, the engagement on this hub is awful, but I'm having so much fun. Yeah! Woo! Whoa, that's a big commitment there. Yeah. Bike's a little bit stiffer than some, but less stiff than others. Oh yeah, so good. It's a really choppy section that just beats you up, and I can feel how it'd be fatiguing over time on a lot of this stuff, but not as fatiguing as the Orbea or the common saw. For a big brand, this bike is surprisingly good. I love that they spec'd good tires with this, because it allows me to really rip this thing. Even though it's got a budget fork, if you tune it right, woo! Okay, I just rolled the tire there. It can't handle the G-outs with these narrow rims. You can feel the tire when you hit corners hard. Oh, that was good. Yeah, this is just a fantastic all-around trail bike. When you look at it on paper, you see the specs and you're like, no, there's other bikes with better components for that price. so far I haven't found one that rides better than this. It's all about the frame to me. That's the one part you can't change. And I'll bet you most people couldn't tell the difference between this SX and XX1 shifter if they were blindfolded. It performs great. Yeah, it's heavy. You forget about it though and you just start riding. This is a really fun bike. Way to go, Specialized. I'm not sure if I'd feel comfortable taking this on Highline or Hogs or hanging over the big double blacks here. Probably, but it's about at the limit. But there are hardly any hardtails I like taking on those trails. But I think it could handle it. This bike stays composed. When it gets going fast, it doesn't feel any less in control than slow. In fact, it feels a little more in control. It jumps and bunny hops well. Manuals well. It's so fun. It doesn't quite have the refined frame feel as a great steel, a great tie, or even a great aluminum bike like the Banshee. It's not quite in that level of fantastic, amazing frames. I wouldn't mind it if it was a little bit softer. I'm glad it's not any harsher or it'd start to be a problem. But what I like about this is I could go anywhere in the country, find a shop that rents these, and even the comp mode, I could go out, rip, and have a blast on it. And if you can't have fun on this bike, if you need to have better components to have fun, you're missing out. You just need to learn how to tune the cheaper components and make them work for you. This bike is a hoot. This is what modern hardtails should be like. And it rides different than the geo numbers suggest. I think part of the reason I love this bike is because when you look at it on paper, it seems like a bike you wouldn't love. You're like, it's kind of got low-end everything. But then you get on it and it rips. If you're a decent rider, you can squeeze a lot of performance out of this. Is it overpriced? Possibly. But one nice thing about it is you've got shops all over the country, all over the world that have this bike in it. And you can go throw a leg over it. You can go see it in person. You can try a medium and a large and see which one feels better. You can't do that with the online direct-to-consumer bikes. And so many people are lured away at the cheapest bike with the highest spec that they buy it without ever looking at it or riding it. Then they convince themselves they made the best decision ever because it was cheap. But they never really rode any other ones to find out. The frame is the heart of a bicycle. It's what makes it snap around and feel good and dance underneath you in the corners and the jumps. No components can change that. And this frame's great. I really am impressed with this little bike. This bike you could take just about anywhere and have a really fun time on it. How could this bike be perfect with another $100 of Specialized putting the right parts in? Wider rims and a better hub. If it had those two things, man, there'd be nothing else like it for the price, in my opinion. This is probably the bike that I'm going to recommend when people don't tell me how long they've been riding or where they ride, and they just want a decent bike, I can't imagine a place this bike would not be great. It's fun on the flow here. It's fun on the chunk here. These tires are a little bit scary at speed with how they want to roll. Oh yeah. What a night. All right, we got a fun little technical feature here to try and get up. Yeah, it feels great on that stuff. I love that this isn't a total slacked out hardcore hardtail. I love those, you know I do. But they managed to have the control and feel of a big slacked out one without slacking it out. To me, this feels a little closer to 65-degree head angle than the 66.5 that it states on the chart. This bike rides nothing like its geo charts. This feels slacker than the common saw, even though it's not by a long shot. Just feels really balanced. What a beautiful night, holy cow. What I like about this is a lot of people can experience what a decent hardtail feels like because Specialized is everywhere. If you're not a hardtail rider and you hate them, but you're a little bit curious, you might want to see kind of what it's all about on the modern ones. See if you can rent one of these and get the suspension set up perfect. And who knows, you might like it, you might not. But this is a good representation of what a modern hardtail should be. If you can't tell, I'm impressed by this little bike. I had pretty low expectations looking at the geo chart, the specs, the parts on it, knowing how the last Fuse rode. But this little bike is awesome. I really like it. Here we go on Axis, one of the newest trails here in Sedona. I don't think I've featured this on my channel yet. Nate Hills has a cool video of this. It's got some little surprises on it. Man, even right there at 10 miles an hour, I rolled the tire. And that's unnerving, so this does need wider rims to really rail stuff. It's like the people speccing this know that they need 2.6s to keep it competitive, but they're not really sold on it enough to put the rims on it that need it. These brakes are just fine for me. Of course, I can feel the difference between a Pike and a good set of codes. But you don't need it. Bad parts, even low-end parts, are good these days. Oh, so fun. So glad I got to ride this bike actually in the comp mode. I think I would have really loved it in the expert mode, but in comp, it surprised me way more than I thought. A little bit, this is a lot chunkier than it looks. This bike handles the chunk well. It's just a joy to ride. It makes little blue trails like this really fun. Watch out for hikers in case they're around the corner. This thing corners really well. It loves to get airborne off of little stuff. Woo, chunky! I think this bike works really well with clipless pedals. That's how I'm running it right now. You're not going to mistake it for a super aggressive downhill bike. You're not going to mistake it for an XC bike. But it dips into those categories just fine. I'd take this over a Kona Hanzo any day. So much more composed, more playful, more fun. Take this over a Commensal. I'd take this over any bike I've ridden under $2,000. What bikes do I like more than this? That Banshee Paradox V3 I like more. I like the Middle Child Tie more. I like this more than the Middle Child Chromo. It's time to rate this bike. Stiffness. I'm gonna rate it an 8 out of 10. It's softer than the Orbea and the Commensal. It's probably slightly softer than most aluminum frames, but it's still not soft per se. Not as soft as the Banshee. Definitely not as soft as my Middle Child Tie, or a really good supple steel frame like that Ionic Johnny Rotten. But for what it is, it's impressive. Climbing, it's heavy, but it doesn't feel quite as heavy as it is. It doesn't feel light, I'll tell you that. Probably give it a 9 out of climbing. It needs a steeper seat angle. I've got the seat rail slid all the way forward, and I still want it steeper. Cornering, 10 out of 10. I'm so glad we have low offset forks these days. They corner so well. This head angle, paired with this amount of travel, paired with the short chainstay, makes this thing a joy to corner. Downhills, I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. I haven't overwhelmed it yet. I've overwhelmed the tires and the rims. I feel like this bike has a lot more to give, but I need 35, 36 mil rims to find it. So I'm gonna give it 9 out of 10 for downhills. Playfulness, I'm gonna give this a 9.5 out of 10. Having those chainstays in the short position makes manuals, jumps, bunny hops, popping off stuff super fun. And it's awesome. It actually has tire clearance with 2.6s with the chainstays all the way slammed forward. Some people have even got 2.8s in there. If you could fit 3.0s on here, boy, that'd be such a cool bike packing rig. This thing's got some good party in it. This thing is like your kid sister's best friend, that you never really look at them that way, and then when you get to know them, they're super fun, and you're just like, how did I not discover how fun this person is? If you judge books by their covers, you will misjudge this bike. You need to get out and ride it. It's really fun. It wants to party. It's like your younger brother that wants to tag along, and at first you're like, no, he's gonna ruin it. And then it turns out he becomes your best friend, and then you always want him to tag along with you because it's so good. That's what this bike is like. I have a fond emotional attachment to this bike. It's weird. I think the color's fantastic. Specialized has been killing it on their colors. I like the frame shape. I think it's a beautiful bike. I don't like how short the head tube is. I wish the stack was a little bit higher. But man, if those are the only complaints I can say about Geo, you know they nailed it. I think the Banshee and the Middle Child are the only other two bikes I've ridden that I had so little to say about the Geo. Yeah, this is just a little trail ripper. It punches way above its weight class. And even though there are bikes with better components for the money, much better components, I think this is the better bike to get. needs better wheels though. Come on, Specialized. Next year I'd love to see 35s on this. That would really seal the deal as this being the budget bike to beat. I wholeheartedly endorse this bike and recommend for those that are sick of looking and don't want to learn about geometry or shop around a lot, just buy this bike and be done and learn how to ride it really well. Put some money into courses and clinics and this thing will not let you down. Oh, I'm having a blast. So good. Woo! I know this sounds like a glowing review. I had super low expectations for this bike looking at it on paper. This bike is far more than the sum of its parts, and it makes for such an enjoyable experience. Would I love a nicer fork? Sure. Would I love nicer brakes? Sure. Do I need them to have fun? Absolutely not. This is a riot, and this is what hardtails are about. Cheap, indestructible, easy, and they can handle a little bit of everything. They're not the best at most things. They're not going to be the fastest bike on the trail. It won't be the fastest up, won't be the fastest down, but I guarantee you, you're going to be smiling more than most of your buddies if you're on one of these. If you enjoyed this review and learned something, consider supporting this channel by becoming a patron, and check out my other reviews and my other educational content. Thanks for watching. There's a party in the mountains, and you're invited.